Leamer's Warhol's Muses delivers a poignant and often unsettling deep dive into the lives of the women who orbited Andy Warhol's factory. The author excels at crafting vivid, character-driven narratives, meticulously detailing the backgrounds, aspirations, and ultimately, the tragic declines of figures like Edie Sedgwick, Nico, and Candy Darling. Leamer skillfully employs a compassionate yet unsparing lens, revealing the profound human cost of fame, the destructive allure of the factory's drug-fueled environment, and Warhol's detached, often exploitative, role in these women's lives. The strength of the book lies in its raw, unvarnished portrayal of addiction, mental instability, and societal prejudice, providing a crucial counter-narrative to the glamorous facade often associated with the pop art era. While the book's unflinching honesty is its greatest asset, the relentless focus on the dark trajectory of many muses, particularly the detailed accounts of drug use and exploitation, can at times be emotionally challenging. Some readers might find the narrative's consistent emphasis on the fall of these women, while historically accurate, occasionally overshadows their moments of creative brilliance or personal resilience. Additionally, while Warhol's detached nature is a central theme, the book's consistent portrayal of him as an observer who often enabled destructive behavior, though well supported, leaves little room for exploring any potential complexities or personal struggles he might have faced in his relationships with his muses beyond his artistic and commercial pursuits. Despite these aspects, Warhol's Muses leaves a powerful and enduring impression as an essential, often heartbreaking, historical document. Its lasting impression is one of profound empathy for the individuals who became both catalysts and casualties of the Warhol phenomenon. The book serves as a vital corrective to romanticized views of the 1960s counterculture, firmly establishing itself as a critical resource for understanding the intricate and often devastating interplay between art, celebrity, and personal vulnerability. For anyone interested in the true stories behind the iconic images, this book offers an indispensable, unvarnished look at the lives and legacies of Warhol's most significant inspirations. Warhol's Muses by Laurence Leamer. In Chapter 1, we are immediately plunged into the enduring legacy of Andy Warhol, an artist whose impact far transcended the canvases he produced. Leamer deftly establishes Warhol as the defining figure of pop art, an American movement that democratized fine art by elevating common artifacts to stunning images. The chapter highlights Warhol's remarkable foresight in understanding societal shifts, particularly his grasp of alienation beneath America's facile optimism, even as he cultivated his own personal brand before the concept was widespread. A core theme emerging from this introductory chapter is Warhol's calculated ambition for fame and social ascension. Unlike his contemporaries, Warhol actively sought self-promotion, viewing himself as a figure who art connoisseurs could not live without. Leamer portrays Warhol as a seemingly unlikely socialite, awkward and openly gay in a less than hospitable era, who strategically leveraged a coterie of stunning women to achieve his desired social cachet and publicity. These women, whom Warhol dubbed his superstars, became integral to his self-creation, serving not primarily as subjects for his art but as vital instruments in raising his public profile and facilitating his entry into rarefied social circles. The chapter's strength lies in its compelling argument for the superstars' often overlooked contributions to Warhol's success. Leamer introduces a fascinating array of these women, detailing their diverse, often privileged backgrounds and their individual rebellions. He posits that these artistic muses were key to transforming the Pittsburgh-born son of Eastern European immigrants into international artist Andy Warhol. The weakness, if any, in this opening chapter is perhaps the rapid-fire introduction of so many superstars, which, while necessary to establish their collective importance, leaves the reader eager for the deeper dives into their individual stories promised by the book's title. Riding the Whirlwind sets the stage for a book that will appeal to a broad audience, from art history enthusiasts and students of pop culture to readers interested in biography, gender studies, and the intersection of celebrity and social influence. It offers a fresh perspective on a familiar figure, suggesting that Warhol's most enduring creation might well have been himself, meticulously crafted with the indispensable aid of his superstars. This chapter effectively compels the reader to continue, promising to shed new light on the complex lives of the women who rode the whirlwind alongside Warhol, often at great personal cost. It is an essential read for anyone seeking a more nuanced understanding of Andy Warhol's meteoric rise. and the often unacknowledged figures who propelled it. In Party of the Decade, the second chapter of Laurence Leamer's Warhol's Muses, the author vividly reconstructs the pivotal April 1964 Stable Gallery show and its raucous after-party, an event that solidified Andy Warhol's burgeoning notoriety while simultaneously exposing his artistic insecurities. Leamer effectively portrays Warhol as a meticulous impresario, more concerned with challenging the mandarins of high art by presenting industrial art, specifically his faux brio boxes, as fine art. The chapter underscores the initial resistance to such unconventional art, noting that most viewers in 1964 wouldn't recognize a bunch of empty boxes piled on a gallery floor as art at all. A central theme is Warhol's canny understanding of self-promotion and the evolving social landscape of 1960s New York. The disappointing sales at the gallery opening, despite significant public interest, serve as a crucial turning point. Leamer highlights the symbiotic relationship Warhol cultivated with patrons like Robert and Ethel Scull, who, despite their, quote, hardly social contact with the upscale residents of Manhattan, leveraged their art collecting to gain entry into previously locked social circles. This observation, Leamer notes, was a, quote, lesson Warhol observed closely. This chapter meticulously details the transformation of Warhol's scruffy studio into the iconic silver foil-covered factory, a space that became a crucible for the era's changing social customs and a magnet for a diverse mix of society, from socially conservative New Yorkers to beat poets and radical playwrights. The chapter's strength lies in its rich anecdotal detail, particularly the depiction of the chaotic and boundary-pushing after-party, which included instances of public sexual acts and uninhibited dancing. Leamer also delves into Warhol's personal insecurities and the painstaking self-reinvention that led to his iconic silver wig and makeup, a mask Warhol wore to greet the world. Another significant aspect explored is Warhol's rivalry with Roy Lichtenstein, a concern that deeply troubled Warhol given their similar appropriation of cartoon imagery. Leamer articulates the philosophical divergence between the two artists, with Lichtenstein viewing his art as intellectual parody and Warhol as a, quote, truth-sayer, exposing a darkening world drained of humanity. While providing a fascinating glimpse into the nascent pop art scene and Warhol's calculated rise, the chapter occasionally feels slightly disjointed in its flow between Warhol's artistic intentions, his personal struggles, and the party's general debauchery. The shift to a brief biographical sketch of Warhol's mother at the end feels a bit abrupt, though it sets up a future theme. This chapter will strongly appeal to readers interested in the formative years of the pop art movement, the social history of 1960s New York, and the psychology of celebrity. It offers a candid and often unflinching look at Warhol's ambition and the strategic choices he made to cement his place in the art world, even if it meant navigating personal and professional setbacks. For booksellers and librarians, this book is an excellent recommendation for those seeking a behind-the-scenes look at an iconic artist and the cultural milieu that shaped him, providing context to the broader narrative of Warhol's Muses. In The Velvet Underground, the third chapter of Laurence Leamer's Warhol's Muses, we witness Andy Warhol's continued evolution from artist to impresario, solidifying his role as a cultural provocateur and chronicler of his era. Leamer centers this chapter on Warhol's strategic cultivation of the Velvet Underground, transforming a struggling rock band into a potent symbol of his factory's artistic output, and a new, often unsettling, expression of pop art. The core theme here is Warhol's prescient understanding of synergy between different artistic mediums, and his ability to leverage emerging talent to further his own brand and vision. Leamer effectively portrays the nascent Velvet Underground, Lou Reed, John Cale, Sterling Morrison, and Maureen Tucker, as a group initially at odds with their own sound and image, and struggling to find commercial success. Their raw, gritty music, often dealing with themes of drug addiction, perversion, sadomasochism, and death, stood in stark contrast to the saccharine pop of the day. Warhol's intervention, particularly his insistence on incorporating the German singer Nico, initially created friction within the band, but ultimately diversified their sound and expanded their appeal. Nico's haunting presence and deeply melodic singing provided a counterpoint to Reed's harsh lyrics, creating a unique sonic tension. A significant strength of this chapter is Leamer's detailed account of the exploding plastic inevitable, Warhol's multimedia spectacle that combined the Velvet Underground's music with film projections, light shows, and dance. This immersive experience served as a, quote, radical new way to experience art, pushing the boundaries of what a concert could be and blurring the lines between art, music, and performance. Leamer highlights Warhol's hands-off yet influential approach, stating he never told the band what to do, but rather provided a platform and the necessary mystique. The chapter also delves into the often complex and volatile personal dynamics within the factory, particularly the jealousies and rivalries that simmered beneath the surface. The tension between Lou Reed and John Cale over their artistic direction is a recurring motif, foreshadowing future conflicts. While Leamer paints a vivid picture of this bohemian world, some readers might find the sheer number of characters and their fleeting appearances occasionally disorienting. The Velvet Underground will resonate with readers fascinated by the intersection of music, art, and counterculture in the 1960s. It offers a compelling examination of artistic collaboration, the birth of a groundbreaking musical sound, and Warhol's unparalleled genius for promotion and cultural curation. This chapter makes a strong case for the profound and lasting influence of the factory as a creative hub and Warhol's unique role in shaping not just the art world, but the broader cultural landscape. It's an indispensable read for anyone seeking to understand the origins of alternative rock and the often unseen forces behind artistic innovation. In Warhol on Film, the fourth chapter of Laurence Leamer's Warhol's Muses, the focus shifts to Andy Warhol's deep immersion in filmmaking and the role his superstars played within this burgeoning aspect of his artistic empire. Leamer argues that Warhol's fascination with film stemmed from his belief that it was the ultimate medium to capture the human condition, capable of revealing deeper truths than still photography or painting. The core theme is Warhol's use of film not just as an artistic outlet, but as a tool for documenting his factory and its inhabitants, and ultimately for constructing his own legend. Leamer highlights Warhol's initial, often technically crude, approach to filmmaking, beginning with silent, black-and-white portraits of visitors to the factory, such as the socialite Baby Jane Holzer. These early films, like Kiss and Haircut, often involved simple, unedited shots, designed to capture the essence of his subjects without overt narrative. The strength of this chapter lies in its portrayal of Warhol's unique directorial style, a passive, observational approach that often involved minimal instruction, allowing his superstars to simply be themselves in front of the camera, or, more accurately, to perform heightened versions of their personas. This method, Leamer suggests, revealed the depths of emotion that often remained hidden in their public lives. The chapter details the pivotal role of figures like Gerard Malanga, a dancer and poet who became Warhol's assistant and a key collaborator in the films, acting as director, actor, and general manager. The introduction of 16mm sound films, particularly Poor Little Rich Girl, starring Edie Sedgwick, marks a significant development, allowing for more complex narratives and a deeper exploration of the superstars' troubled lives. Leamer emphasizes that Warhol's films, while often appearing avant-garde or even shocking, were ultimately about capturing reality, albeit a highly curated one. A potential weakness is that while the chapter vividly describes the factory's atmosphere and the superstars' performances, it could delve deeper into the critical reception of these films at the time and their lasting cinematic influence beyond their documentary value. However, Leamer effectively conveys the chaotic yet creatively fertile environment of the factory, where the line between art and life was constantly blurred. Warhol on Film will appeal to film scholars, fans of experimental cinema, and those interested in the counterculture of the 1960s. It provides an insightful look into Warhol's often overlooked filmography and illuminates how his superstars, through their willingness to expose themselves on screen, became integral to his vision. This chapter solidifies the book's broader argument that Warhol's genius lay not just in his iconic pop art, but in his comprehensive approach to documenting and influencing the cultural zeitgeist through various mediums. In Truth, Naked and Otherwise, the fifth chapter of Laurence Leamer's Warhol's Muses, we are drawn into the chaotic and often destructive orbit of Andy Warhol's factory through the lens of Edie Sedgwick's tragic unraveling. The chapter opens with Warhol's calculated move to Max's Kansas City, a new venue that, despite its initially déclassé location, quickly became a hub for the avant-garde due to Warhol's regular presence. This transition signifies Warhol's continuous quest for new stages to showcase his evolving scene and his superstars. The central theme is the increasingly volatile and exploitative nature of the factory environment, particularly its devastating impact on Edie Sedgwick. Leamer portrays Sedgwick's trajectory from a privileged yet troubled East Coast debutante to a vulnerable figure consumed by the factory's excesses. We learn of her turbulent family history, including her father's sexual intercourse with her and her institutionalization for eating disorders and mental health issues. Her desperation for acceptance and affection made her particularly susceptible to Warhol's detached observation. A primary strength of this chapter is its unflinching depiction of the dark side of Warhol's influence. Leamer meticulously details Sedgwick's descent into drug abuse, her increasingly erratic behavior, and the pervasive sense of voyeurism and lack of intervention from those around her. Warhol, while seemingly caring, is depicted as fundamentally passive, observing her self-destruction without offering genuine help. This passive voyeur-sadist dynamic, as noted in earlier chapters, becomes painfully clear here. The chapter vividly conveys the atmosphere of the factory as a place where boundaries dissolved and personal well-being was often sacrificed for artistic truth and Warhol's larger-than-life projects. A potential weakness, though perhaps intentional, is the unrelenting focus on Sedgwick's decline, which can make for a difficult read at times. However, this serves to underscore the chapter's powerful message about the human cost of Warhol's artistic and social experimentation. The narrative effectively highlights the quote-quote savage logic of the 15 minutes of fame that Warhol famously predicted, and the devastating consequences for those, like Sedgwick, who burned brightly but briefly within his orbit. Truth, Naked and Otherwise will appeal to readers interested in the human toll of celebrity, the darker undercurrents of the 1960s counterculture, and the personal lives behind Warhol's artistic facade. It's a poignant and at times disturbing account that serves as a stark reminder that while Warhol created iconic art, the human lives within his factory often paid a profound price. For booksellers and librarians, this chapter reinforces the book's value for those seeking a more critical and empathetic look at the individuals who fueled Warhol's creative fire, moving beyond the superficial glamour to explore the complex realities of their lives. In The Times They Are A-Changin', the 6th chapter of Laurence Leamer's Warhol's Muses, the narrative shifts focus to the enigmatic Nico, one of Warhol's most distinctive superstars, and her journey from fashion model to avant-garde musician within the factory orbit. The chapter opens by drawing parallels between Salvador Dali's calculated image-making and Warhol's, suggesting that both artists understood the importance of creating a unique persona. This theme of self-creation and public perception is central to Nico's story as well. Leamer portrays Nico, born Krista Puffkin, as a woman of striking beauty and an almost aristocratic demeanor, despite her humble German origins during World War II. Her early career in fashion, working with designers like Chanel and appearing in Vogue, established her visual appeal. However, her true artistic calling emerged through her music, a haunting, melancholic sound that stood in stark contrast to the era's pop music. The chapter highlights her transition from a conventional beauty to a complex artist, showcasing her deep fascination with philosophers like Nietzsche and her enigmatic personal life. A significant strength of this chapter is its nuanced portrayal of Nico, moving beyond her superficial image as a Warholian muse to reveal her as a serious and often tormented artist. Leamer details her collaborations with various musicians, including Bob Dylan, who, despite his fame, loved to hang out with Nico, singing her songs and talking with her about art and life. Her struggle for artistic control and recognition, particularly within the Velvet Underground, where she was initially seen as an outsider, is a compelling thread. The chapter also touches upon her relationships with prominent figures like Jim Morrison and Jackson Browne, underscoring her magnetic, yet often destructive, allure. While the chapter provides a rich tapestry of Nico's life, it occasionally jumps between time periods and relationships, which can be slightly disorienting for the reader attempting to follow a linear progression. However, this non-linear approach might also reflect the fragmented nature of Nico's own experiences and self-perception. The Times They Are A-Changin' will strongly appeal to readers interested in the music history of the 1960s and 70s, particularly the roots of alternative and goth music. It offers a captivating character study of Nico, revealing her as a pivotal figure in the avant-garde scene, and a testament to Warhol's ability to identify and amplify raw, unconventional talent. For booksellers and librarians, this chapter makes Warhol's Muses a valuable acquisition for collections on music biography, counterculture studies, and the broader impact of the factory beyond pop art. In The Youthquaker Loses Her Way, the 7th chapter of Laurence Leamer's Warhol's Muses, the spotlight returns to Edie Sedgwick, chronicling her continued decline within and ultimately outside of Andy Warhol's direct influence. The chapter opens with Edie's immediate return to New York and her starring role in Warhol's film, Kitchen. This film, meant to elevate her to stardom, instead highlights her increasing struggles, with Edie resorting to sneezing to be fed lines due to her amphetamine use. A core theme emerging from this chapter is the escalating toll of the factory lifestyle on Edie's physical and mental health. Leamer details her reliance on drugs to maintain her energy and slim figure, and the growing concern among her friends about her well-being. Despite this, Warhol remains a detached observer, more interested in her performance than her person. The chapter emphasizes how the factory, initially a place of creative freedom, became a crucible for self-destruction for many of its inhabitants, Edie chief among them. The strength of this chapter lies in its raw and empathetic portrayal of Edie's vulnerability and her desperate search for a stable identity amidst the chaos. Leamer effectively conveys her disillusionment with Warhol and the factory scene, as she confides in journalists like Nora Ephron about her isolated life and the nonsense to work out of her system. Her refusal to participate in a Warhol film retrospective, stating "Everybody in New York is laughing at me," and "These movies are making a complete fool out of me," marks a poignant moment of self-awareness and a desperate attempt to break free from Warhol's controlling narrative. A potential weakness of the chapter is that while it provides a detailed account of Edie's personal struggles, it could delve deeper into the specific artistic or thematic impact of Kitchen and other films on Warhol's overall oeuvre, beyond their role in Edie's life. However, the chapter's primary focus remains firmly on Edie, providing a necessary counterbalance to the often romanticized view of the factory. The Youthquaker Loses Her Way will strongly appeal to readers interested in the human cost of celebrity and the darker aspects of the 1960s art scene. It's a critical read for those seeking to understand the complex relationship between artist and muse, and the often destructive power dynamics at play. For booksellers and librarians, this chapter reinforces the book's value as a nuanced biographical work that moves beyond the iconic images to explore the profound personal narratives of those who populated Andy Warhol's world. In Nights of Amphetamine Dreams, the 8th chapter of Laurence Leamer's Warhol's Muses, the focus shifts to Brigid Berlin, a complex and often volatile member of Andy Warhol's inner circle, highlighting the pervasive drug culture and the self-destructive tendencies that characterize the factory scene. The chapter introduces Berlin as an amphetamine addict who seamlessly integrated into the factory's eccentric world, becoming one of Warhol's closest friends and allies. Warhol, ever the observer, found Berlin's endless monologues and tales of injustice captivating. A core theme is the deeply dysfunctional and often enabling environment of the factory, where drug use was not merely tolerated but, in some cases, seen as a catalyst for artistic expression or simply a part of the scene. Berlin's life story, marked by a privileged yet emotionally turbulent upbringing as the daughter of a powerful media executive, reveals a pattern of rebellion and a desperate search for identity outside the confines of her conservative family. Her mother's rigid expectations and her father's demanding nature contributed to Berlin's feelings of being unloved and misunderstood. The strength of this chapter lies in its raw and unvarnished portrayal of Berlin's struggles with addiction and her desperate attempts to gain attention and validation. Leamer details her outlandish behaviors, such as publicly injecting drugs, and her tit-tape performances, which, while shocking, also served as a form of artistic expression within the factory's embrace of the unconventional. Her often abusive relationship with her mother and her contentious interactions with others in the factory, particularly Rotten Rita, underscore the chaotic and often cruel dynamics at play. A potential weakness of the chapter is that, at times, the detailed accounts of drug use and interpersonal conflicts can feel overwhelming, though this may be intentional to convey the intensity of the factory environment. However, the chapter's deep dive into Berlin's psyche and her role as a living embodiment of the factory's darker aspects is compelling. Nights of Amphetamine Dreams will resonate with readers interested in the unfiltered realities of the 1960s counterculture and the darker side of celebrity. It's an important read for those seeking to understand the psychological complexities of the superstars and the often destructive allure of the factory. For booksellers and librarians, this chapter solidifies the book's standing as a vital resource for exploring the human stories intertwined with Andy Warhol's artistic legacy, making it a compelling recommendation for collections on art history, social history, and addiction narratives. In The Long Goodbye, the 9th chapter of Laurence Leamer's Warhol's Muses, the narrative chronicles the final, painful severance of Edie Sedgwick from Andy Warhol's orbit, alongside the surprising inception of the Velvet Underground's association with the factory. The chapter opens in December 1965 with Warhol ever hunting, questing on the lookout for something new, discovering the Velvet Underground at the unlikely venue of Café Bazaar in Greenwich Village. This serendipitous encounter marks Warhol's determination to stay ahead of the curve in music, just as he had done in art and film. A central theme is the growing disillusionment and eventual break between Edie Sedgwick and Warhol. Edie's increasing drug use and erratic behavior lead to a dramatic confrontation at the Ginger Man restaurant. Leamer highlights Edie's desperate plea for Warhol to pay her taxi fare, which he refuses, stating he has no money. This public snub, after all she had given to his films and his persona, marks the definitive end of their intensely codependent relationship. Edie's departure from the restaurant, stating "I'm leaving, goodbye," signifies her final break with Warhol's world. The strength of this chapter lies in its poignant portrayal of Edie's isolation and the transactional nature of her relationship with Warhol. Leamer reveals Edie's desperate attempts to reach Bob Dylan, whom she believed had betrayed her. The chapter also introduces the manipulative figure of Chuck Ween, Edie's former friend and manager, who, feeling stiffed by Edie, plots to find her replacement. This leads to the introduction of a new superstar, a woman whom Warhol finds looked like a piece of trash, but is nevertheless intrigued by as Edie's successor. While the chapter vividly captures the emotional devastation of Edie's final interactions with Warhol, the immediate transition to the Velvet Underground story, while historically accurate, can feel slightly abrupt, momentarily shifting focus from the emotional core of Edie's departure. However, this serves to underscore Warhol's relentless pursuit of the next new thing, even as his previous muses fade. The Long Goodbye will resonate with readers fascinated by the human cost of artistic ambition and the often brutal dynamics within the factory. It offers a raw and candid look at the end of a pivotal relationship in Warhol's career and the relentless churn of personalities that defined his scene. For booksellers and librarians, this chapter reinforces the book's value as a crucial biographical account, providing insight into both Warhol's evolving artistic interests and the often tragic fates of those who became entangled in his singular world. Ich Fate Ensiftaris. In The Bone Crusher, the 10th chapter of Laurence Leamer's Warhol's Muses, the narrative introduces Mary Woronov, a new superstar, and delves into the increasingly complex and often fraught internal dynamics of the factory, particularly through the lens of Warhol's relationship with Danny Williams. The chapter opens with Gerard Malanga, acting as a, quote, Pied Piper, leading women to Warhol with the promise of film roles, highlighting Warhol's continued reliance on intermediaries to discover and cultivate new talent. A central theme is the internal power struggles and manipulative relationships within the factory, which often mirrored Warhol's own passive-aggressive tendencies. The chapter establishes Mary Woronov as a striking, unconventional art student drawn into this world, initially through her attraction to Malanga. Her independent spirit and refusal to conform to traditional feminine roles. She was a radical, rejecting makeup, didn't shave her legs, make her a compelling addition to Warhol's stable of muses, representing a different facet of the burgeoning counterculture. The strength of this chapter lies in its detailed exploration of Warhol's complex relationship with Danny Williams, a talented light show artist whose brilliance was increasingly overshadowed by the factory's internal politics. Leamer skillfully portrays Paul Morrissey's jealousy and competitive nature, which led to a fistfight on the catwalk with Williams, a stark illustration of the factory's volatile atmosphere. More significantly, the chapter highlights Warhol's disturbing detachment as he observes Morrissey's sadistic behavior towards Williams without intervening. Warhol's manipulative, passive-aggressive mode, as described by Leamer, where he would put Williams down but occasionally have sex with him, reveals a darker, more exploitative side of his character. A potential weakness of the chapter is that it briefly touches on Williams's eventual disappearance and suspected death, leaving the reader with a sense of unresolved tragedy that, while impactful, might have benefited from slightly more direct exploration within this chapter's immediate context. However, the chapter effectively conveys the insidious nature of the factory's environment, where vulnerability was often exploited and boundaries were routinely blurred. The Bone Crusher will appeal to readers interested in the interpersonal dynamics of creative communities, the darker side of fame, and the often unseen human cost of artistic ambition. It provides a stark look at the power structures within Warhol's factory and the psychological toll it took on those who sought validation within its walls. For booksellers and librarians, this chapter reinforces the book's value as a candid and often unsettling examination of Warhol's inner circle, making it a compelling recommendation for collections on art world history, biographies, and studies of counterculture. In A Fallen Debutante, the 11th chapter of Laurence Leamer's Warhol's Muses, the narrative introduces Susan Bottomley, another young woman drawn into the factory's orbit, while continuing to track Edie Sedgwick's deteriorating condition and her attempts to escape its destructive influence. The chapter opens with Gerard Malanga's pursuit of Bottomley, a 17-year-old debutante, highlighting his role as a quote-quote Pied Piper for Warhol, bringing new, often vulnerable talent into the factory fold. A core theme is the factory's seductive yet ultimately perilous allure for young women seeking identity and escape from conventional lives. Bottomley, despite her privileged background, is shown to be drawn to the bohemian lifestyle and Malanga's promise of film stardom. Her transformation, particularly her dramatic hair dye, symbolizes a break from her Boston Brahmin roots and an embrace of the counterculture. The chapter contrasts this with Edie Sedgwick's continued spiral, as she attempts to reconcile with her family, only to face further heartbreak and institutionalization. The strength of this chapter lies in its dual narrative, juxtaposing the fresh, unblemished allure of a new muse with the grim reality of a fallen one. Leamer meticulously details Edie's desperate attempts to find stability, including her reliance on Dr. Robert Neuwirth, who recognized her innate artistic talent, but also the profound self-hatred fueling her drug use. Her ill-fated Christmas visit home, culminating in her father calling the police, is particularly harrowing, underscoring the deep-seated family dysfunction that exacerbated her struggles. This raw portrayal provides a stark reality check to the glamour often associated with the factory. A potential weakness of the chapter is that while it effectively portrays the emotional weight of Edie's situation, the introduction of Susan Bottomley, though significant for demonstrating Warhol's ongoing search for new muses, momentarily diverts from the intensity of Edie's tragic narrative. However, this serves to illustrate the cyclical nature of the factory, constantly consuming new individuals. A Fallen Debutante will deeply resonate with readers interested in the psychological impact of fame, the darker aspects of the 1960s counterculture, and the often unseen struggles of those who became Warhol's muses. It's an essential read for anyone seeking a more compassionate and critical understanding of the human stories behind the pop art movement. For booksellers and librarians, this chapter solidifies the book's place as a vital, unvarnished account of the factory's influence and the personal tragedies it often engendered, making it a crucial addition to collections on art history, social studies, and biographical narratives of the era. In Band-Aids Are Not Just for Wounds, the 12th chapter of Laurence Leamer's Warhol's Muses, the narrative focuses on the tragic circumstances surrounding Edie Sedgwick's involvement in the film Ciao, Manhattan, and introduces Viva, a new and highly influential factory superstar. The chapter opens with Chuck Ween, Edie's former manager, attempting to lure her into starring in Ciao, Manhattan, a project conceived as a skin flick, capitalizing on the commercial success of Warhol's Chelsea Girls. A core theme is the continued exploitation of Edie Sedgwick, even as she attempts to break free from the factory's orbit, alongside the emergence of Viva as a more resilient and intellectually grounded muse. Leamer highlights the deceptive nature of the Ciao Manhattan filmmakers, who withheld crucial details about the film's funding and true intentions from Edie. Her participation in the Be in Central Park, filmed while she was high, underscores her ongoing vulnerability and the predatory nature of those around her. The strength of this chapter lies in its contrasting portrayals of Edie's final, desperate attempts at relevance and Viva's sharp wit and self-awareness. Leamer effectively introduces Viva, born Janet Susan Mary Hoffman, as a middle-class Catholic schoolgirl who, despite her sheltered upbringing, possessed a keen intellect and a talent for improvisation. Her ability to hold forth on diverse topics, from Catholic ritual to the most basic human functions, made her a fascinating subject for Warhol's camera. The chapter highlights Warhol's immediate fascination with Viva, leading him to feature her prominently in films like The Loves of Ondine, and eventually make her a, quote, regular in his films. Viva's willingness to appear nude, or partially nude, yet always with a sense of control and intellect, sets her apart from previous muses like Edie. A potential weakness is the brief return to the details of Edie's physical deterioration and her increasing reliance on drugs, which, while crucial for context, can be emotionally challenging. However, this serves to emphasize the book's consistent message about the dark underbelly of the factory's allure. Band-Aids Are Not Just for Wounds will appeal to readers interested in the complexities of celebrity, the ethics of documentary filmmaking, and the diverse personalities that populated Warhol's world. It's a critical read for understanding the distinctions between Warhol's muses and the various ways they navigated his influence. For booksellers and librarians, this chapter solidifies the book's value as a comprehensive and often unsparing look at the human drama inherent in the pop art movement, making it an important addition to collections on art, film, and counterculture history. In Come On Light My Fire, the 13th chapter of Laurence Leamer's Warhol's Muses, the narrative delves further into the tragic and self-destructive path of Edie Sedgwick, punctuated by a harrowing fire incident, and also touches upon Brigid Berlin's ongoing struggles with addiction. The chapter opens with a chilling anecdote of Leonard Cohen's visit to Edie's room at the Chelsea Hotel, where he is disturbed by her lit candles, ominously predicting fire and destruction. This foreboding sets the stage for the dramatic events that follow. A core theme is the profound and often fatal consequences of the factory's culture of excess and neglect, particularly for its most vulnerable members. Edie's apartment catching fire, forcing her to escape through a burning door, is a stark symbol of her life spiraling out of control. Leamer highlights the immediate aftermath, including her burned hands and the mercenary attitude of Chow, Manhattan producer Robert Margouleff, who sees her injuries as a mere obstacle to his film's completion. The film's continued production, despite Edie's escalating heroin, amphetamine, and barbiturate use, underscores the exploitative nature of her environment. The strength of this chapter lies in its raw, unvarnished depiction of Edie's desperation and the severe physical and psychological toll of her addictions. Leamer details her continued engagement in the skin-flick aspects of Chow Manhattan, driven by a desperate need for money and a fleeting sense of purpose. The narrative also weaves in Brigid Berlin's concurrent battle with addiction, leading to her hospitalization for hepatitis, further emphasizing the pervasive drug abuse within Warhol's circle. Brigid's cavalier attitude towards her own health. This was but another amusing misadventure to recount to Warhol, chillingly illustrates the normalization of self-destruction. A potential weakness of the chapter, though it serves to underscore the grim reality, is the relentless focus on the character's deterioration, which can be difficult to read. However, this unflinching approach is crucial for understanding the true human cost of the factory's seemingly glamorous facade. Come On Light My Fire will resonate deeply with readers interested in the dark underbelly of the 1960s counterculture, the devastating effects of addiction, and the often unseen suffering behind public personas. It's a vital read for those seeking a compassionate yet critical understanding of the lives of Warhol's muses beyond the pop art narrative. For booksellers and librarians, this chapter reinforces the book's importance as a crucial, unsparing biographical account, making it a compelling recommendation for collections on art history, social issues, and true stories of resilience and tragedy. In Up Your Ass and Other Niceties, the 14th chapter of Laurence Leamer's Warhol's Muses, the focus shifts to Valerie Solanas, an increasingly unstable radical feminist whose growing paranoia and grievances against men, particularly Andy Warhol, would culminate in a violent act. The chapter introduces Solanas through her self-published manifesto, Scume, Society for Cutting Up Men, a provocative and often shocking text that advocated for the elimination of the male sex. A core theme is the dangerous intersection of radical ideology, mental instability, and personal grievance, leading to a profound sense of betrayal and a desire for retribution. Leamer portrays Solanas as a complex figure, at once a serious intellectual grappling with societal inequities and a deeply disturbed individual whose paranoid delusions intensified over time. Her early life, marked by sexual abuse and a transient existence, provides a tragic context for her extreme views. The chapter highlights her desperate attempts to gain recognition for her work, particularly her play Up Your Ass, which she believed Warhol had stolen. The strength of this chapter lies in its meticulous detailing of Solanas's escalating paranoia and her increasingly hostile interactions with Warhol and others at the factory. Leamer effectively conveys how Warhol's characteristic evasiveness and inability to give a direct no fueled Solanas's delusions of betrayal. His passive encouragement, coupled with his failure to produce her play or engage with her manifesto, was interpreted by Solanas as deliberate sabotage. The chapter also brings to light the warnings from others, such as factory regular Alan Midget, who recognized the growing threat Solanas posed and even predicted her violent actions. A potential weakness, though inherent to the subject matter, is the unsettling portrayal of Solanas's deteriorating mental state, which can be difficult for the reader to witness. However, this unflinching approach is crucial for understanding the tragic events that follow. Up Your Ass and Other Niceties will deeply resonate with readers interested in the history of radical feminism, the psychology of violence, and the darker, more dangerous aspects of the counterculture. It's an indispensable read for those seeking to understand the events leading up to the attempt on Warhol's life, providing a chilling look at the unraveling of a mind consumed by anger and delusion. For booksellers and librarians, this chapter solidifies the book's value as a crucial historical and psychological study, making it a compelling recommendation for collections on true crime, gender studies, and 20th century American history. In Lonesome Cowboys Riding High, the 15th chapter of Laurence Leamer's Warhol's Muses, the narrative shifts to Andy Warhol's ill-fated venture into filming a Western, Lonesome Cowboys, and the exploitation of Viva, the sole female superstar in the production. The chapter opens with Warhol's entourage in Arizona in January 1968, preparing to shoot his homoerotic fantasy of a Western, a deliberate subversion of traditional American masculinity. A core theme is Warhol's continued experimentation with film as a medium for social commentary and his often unscrupulous methods of extracting performances from his muses. Leamer highlights the film's chaotic production, with 3 pages of vague ideas serving as a script, emphasizing Warhol's improvisational and often detached directorial style. The sheriff's concern and aerial surveillance of the set underscore the controversial nature of Warhol's work, particularly his casting of a transvestite, Francis Francine, as the sheriff. The strength of this chapter lies in its focus on Viva's resilience and intellectual prowess amidst the absurdity of the film set. As the only woman in a largely male, sexually charged environment, Viva navigates the scene with a remarkable degree of self-possession. Her quick wit and ability to go on and on without a script make her an invaluable asset to Warhol. Leamer details the infamous New York Magazine article, La Dolce Viva, which, despite its intention to highlight Viva's brilliance, ultimately exploits her through the controversial nude photographs taken by Diane Arbus. This incident serves as a powerful illustration of the fine line between artistic expression and exploitation. A potential weakness of the chapter is that while it vividly portrays Viva's strength, it also unflinchingly details her humiliation through the Arbus photographs and the subsequent damage to her career. This can make for a difficult read, though it is essential for understanding the full impact of her involvement with Warhol. Lonesome Cowboys Riding High will appeal to readers interested in experimental cinema, the intersection of art and sexuality in the 1960s, and the challenges faced by female artists in a male-dominated world. It's a critical read for understanding the nuances of Warhol's creative process and the often unseen human cost of his artistic vision. For booksellers and librarians, this chapter solidifies the book's value as a significant biographical and cultural study, making it a compelling recommendation for collections on film history, gender studies, and the enduring legacy of the factory. In The Doors Are Locked, the 16th chapter of Laurence Leamer's Warhol's Muses, the narrative reaches its chilling climax with the attempted assassination of Andy Warhol by Valerie Solanas and explores the profound shift in the factory's culture in the aftermath. The chapter opens in mid-1968 with Leamer describing a factory increasingly permeated by drug use and a sense of decay, a stark contrast to its earlier glorious freedom. The rampant amphetamine use, though not leading to outward ranting, wore down the human spirit and led to suicides, yet few in Warhol's circle backed off the drug. A core theme is the devastating consequences of Warhol's detachment and his casual interactions with unstable individuals, coupled with the profound impact of the shooting on his life and art. Leamer meticulously details Solanas' escalating paranoia and her belief that Warhol had stolen her play, Up Your Ass, and conspired against her. Despite numerous warnings from others at the factory, Warhol dismisses Solanas as a mere wannabe, leading to the fateful encounter on June 3, 1968. The chapter vividly recounts the moments leading up to the shooting, Solanas' repeated gun misfires, and the terrifying reality of Warhol being shot multiple times. The strength of this chapter lies in its intense and gripping portrayal of the assassination attempt and its immediate aftermath. Leamer does not shy away from the horrific details of Warhol's injuries, multiple organs pierced, a ragged mess of a liver and spleen, and the heroic efforts of the doctors who saved his life. The immediate reaction of the media, the public, and even his superstars reveals the complex mixture of shock, indifference, and opportunism that surrounded Warhol. His desperate pleas for medical attention and Brigid Berlin's chillingly casual, "I just hope she didn't shoot anybody important," underscore the warped morality of the factory. A potential weakness though inherent to the chapter's focus, is the intense and graphic nature of the shooting details, which can be difficult for some readers. However, this level of detail is crucial for conveying the profound trauma Warhol endured and the turning point it represented in his life and career. The Doors Are Locked will deeply resonate with readers interested in the dark underbelly of fame, the history of violence against public figures, and the transformative power of trauma. It's an indispensable read for anyone seeking to understand the pivotal moment that reshaped Warhol's artistic output and his personal demeanor. For booksellers and librarians, this chapter solidifies the book's value as a gripping and historically significant account of a defining moment in 20th century art and cultural history, making it a crucial addition to collections on art world biographies, true crime, and the social impact of the avant-garde. In The Last Superstar, the 17th chapter of Laurence Leamer's Warhol's Muses, the narrative explores the transformation of the factory in the aftermath of Andy Warhol's shooting and introduces Candy Darling, one of the last iconic superstars. The chapter opens a year after the assassination attempt, in June 1969, with a stark description of the post-Solanas factory as a, quote, controlled setting for a man full of endless anxieties and apprehension, a stark contrast to its earlier, more chaotic freedom. A core theme is the profound and lasting impact of the shooting on Warhol, leading him to retreat from the avant-garde and embrace a more commercial, controlled artistic practice. Leamer highlights Warhol's lingering trauma, evident in his evasiveness about the event and his preference to focus on more amusing things. This shift coincides with a more business-oriented factory, where, quote, the only obvious work going on was a typist transcribing tapes, and the primary focus became the art of the deal rather than artistic experimentation. The strength of this chapter lies in its compelling introduction of Candy Darling, born James Slattery, a trans woman whose blonde hair and stunning beauty captivated Warhol. Leamer meticulously details Darling's early life, marked by a difficult childhood in Long Island, her early understanding of her gender identity, and her unwavering determination to embody the idealized femininity she admired in Hollywood stars. Her friendship with Jackie Curtis and Holly Woodlawn, two other prominent trans figures in the factory, forms a powerful triumvirate that challenges conventional notions of gender and identity. Darling's pursuit of a career in mainstream film, despite her association with the underground, highlights her ambition beyond the factory's confines. A potential weakness of the chapter, though it reflects the historical context, is the portrayal of the societal prejudice and violence faced by trans individuals during this era. However, Leamer's sensitive approach allows the reader to understand the immense courage required for Darling to live authentically. The Last Superstar will appeal to readers interested in LGBTQ+ history, the evolution of the factory, and the lives of those who redefined gender in performance in the 1960s. It's a vital read for understanding Warhol's later artistic period and the resilience of his muses in the face of societal challenges. For booksellers and librarians, this chapter solidifies the book's value as a nuanced and empathetic biographical account, making it a crucial addition to collections on art history, gender studies, and 20th century American counterculture. In The Dying Swan, the 18th chapter of Laurence Leamer's Warhol's Muses, the narrative focuses on the final, tragic decline and death of Candy Darling, one of Warhol's most iconic and beloved superstars. The chapter opens in August 1967, with Warhol's keen observation of dress as a key to character, highlighting his encounter with Candy Darling and Jackie Curtis in Greenwich Village. A core theme is the profound personal cost of living an authentic, yet marginalized, life within the factory's orbit, culminating in Darling's battle with cancer. Leamer portrays Darling as a figure of immense grace and determination, whose stunning presentation as a woman transcended the societal prejudices of the time. Despite her glamorous facade, she faced constant danger and rejection, even from within the gay community. Her pursuit of traditional femininity and her disdain for the freak show aspect of some of the factory's performances underscore her unique aspirations. The strength of this chapter lies in its deeply empathetic and moving portrayal of Darling's final days. Leamer meticulously details her struggle with lymphoma, initially dismissed by doctors who were unaccustomed to treating trans individuals. Her quiet suffering, contrasted with her unwavering commitment to presenting herself as a beautiful woman, even while undergoing debilitating chemotherapy, is heart-wrenching. The chapter highlights her desire for a normal life, including her wish to adopt a child, which was tragically cut short by her illness. Her last photograph by Peter Hujar, portraying her as a dying swan surrounded by white flowers, is a powerful and iconic image of her resilience and grace in the face of death. A potential weakness of the chapter, though it is central to its emotional impact, is the detailed and often painful account of Darling's illness and demise, which can be emotionally challenging for the reader. However, this unflinching approach is vital for understanding the full tragedy of her story. The Dying Swan will deeply resonate with readers interested in LGBTQ+ history, the human cost of artistic and social rebellion, and the profound struggles faced by those who challenged societal norms in the 1960s and 70s. It's an indispensable read for anyone seeking a more intimate and compassionate understanding of the lives of Warhol's muses beyond their public personas. For booksellers and librarians, this chapter solidifies the book's value as a poignant and historically significant biographical account, making it a crucial addition to collections on art history, gender studies, and 20th-century American cultural history. In The Eternal Mystery, the 19th chapter of Laurence Leamer's Warhol's Muses, the narrative returns to Nico's increasingly isolated and drug-fueled existence in the aftermath of her time with Warhol, emphasizing her profound transformation from glamorous model to a figure consumed by heroin. The chapter opens in June 1969, with a journalist observing the, quote, Solanas factory, which is now a stark, controlled environment reflecting Warhol's own anxieties after the shooting. A core theme is the tragic decline of Nico, who, despite her profound artistic depth, becomes increasingly defined by her heroin addiction. Leamer highlights Warhol's own physical and psychological changes after the shooting, his sad, lusterless eyes and anemic pallor, contrasting his retreat into a more controlled, business-oriented factory, with Nico's descent into a deeply self-destructive lifestyle. The chapter vividly portrays Brigid Berlin's continued eccentricities, providing comic relief even as the narrative darkens around Nico. The strength of this chapter lies in its raw and unflinching portrayal of Nico's radical transformation and her embrace of heroin as a means of coping with her internal turmoil and external losses. Leamer details her relationship with French film director Philippe Garrel, a fellow heroin user, which further solidified her addiction. Her deliberate rejection of her former beauty and glamorous image, cutting her hair mannishly and wearing dark, shapeless clothes, underscores her profound disengagement from societal expectations. The chapter reveals the devastating impact of heroin, as Nico found in it a way to turn my shame about my mother into feelings of pleasure that I can dream I am in paradise with her. A potential weakness of the chapter, though it is central to its emotional impact, is the explicit and repetitive focus on heroin use, which can be difficult for the reader. However, this unflinching approach is crucial for understanding the profound tragedy of Nico's later life. The Eternal Mystery will deeply resonate with readers interested in the dark side of the 1960s counterculture, the devastating impact of drug addiction on artistic lives, and the radical transformations individuals undergo in search of identity and oblivion. It's an indispensable read for anyone seeking a more comprehensive and unvarnished understanding of Nico's complex legacy beyond her iconic image as a Warholian muse. For booksellers and librarians, this chapter solidifies the book's value as a poignant and historically significant biographical account, making it a crucial addition to collections on music history, addiction narratives, and 20th-century cultural studies. In Just Another Party, the 20th chapter of Laurence Leamer's Warhol's Muses, the narrative brings the tragic story of Edie Sedgwick to its heartbreaking conclusion, highlighting her final attempts at recovery and the profound indifference she faced even from Warhol. The chapter opens with a rare, warm phone call between Warhol and Edie in 1970, where he expresses delight at reconnecting and acknowledges her beautiful letter written to him after his shooting. A core theme is the cyclical nature of addiction and the devastating impact of unresolved trauma, culminating in Edie's final, fatal overdose. Leamer meticulously details Edie's continued struggles with drug addiction, even as she attempts to stabilize her life. Her encounter with a married gynecologist who introduces her to acid, leading to a night of ecstasy and death riding in tandem, underscores the pervasive availability of drugs and the predatory individuals who exploited her vulnerability. Her subsequent committal to the New York State Psychiatric Institute and the heavy Thorazine regimen highlight the often brutal methods of psychiatric treatment at the time. The strength of this chapter lies in its raw and empathetic portrayal of Edie's desperate search for normalcy and her ultimate inability to escape the allure of drugs. Leamer recounts her return to California, her relationship with Michael Post, and her marriage, a seemingly positive step towards stability. However, The chapter powerfully conveys that even in moments of apparent recovery, the underlying issues and the constant temptation of drugs ultimately proved insurmountable. Her final relapse, triggered by a prescription for chloral hydrate given by a doctor who failed to recognize the extent of her addiction, is a devastating portrayal of systemic neglect. A potential weakness of the chapter, though it is central to the grim reality of Edie's story, is the relentless focus on her decline and the tragic details of her final overdose. However, this unflinching approach is vital for fully grasping the profound human cost of her life. Just Another Party will deeply resonate with readers interested in the devastating impact of addiction, the tragic stories behind celebrity, and the often brutal realities of mental health treatment in the late 20th century. It serves as a powerful and somber conclusion to Edie Sedgwick's narrative, underscoring the broader themes of exploitation and self-destruction that permeated Warhol's orbit. For booksellers and librarians, this chapter solidifies the book's value as a crucial, unsparing biographical account, making it an indispensable addition to collections on art history, addiction narratives, and the cultural landscape of the 1960s and 70s.